North Korea is unlikely to fully give up its nuclear weapons. That's according to the worldwide threat assessment of the US Intelligence Community. The report was presented before the US Senate yesterday. It also says that Iran is not making nuclear weapons, and it emphasized that there's a growing concern of cyber threats from both China and from Russia. We're going to talk about this a little more with Alistair Sanford, who joins us in the studio. Morning to you, Alistair.
Morning, Belle.
Just give us a little bit more of the detail of this report.
Yes, it's a report by the US intelligence community. Now, it's an assessment of the global threat, particularly angled towards US national security, but of course relevant to other parts of the world, including Europe. It covers a huge range of areas, things like election interference, organized crime. It mentions briefly migration, which says that is likely to fuel tensions. On terrorism, it says that ISIS still pose a threat in Iraq and Syria. They've got thousands of fighters and also networks across the world. Now, on nuclear weapons, and in particularly regarding South Korea, its assessment is interesting. On the positive side, it says yes, North Korea has stopped carrying out tests now for over a year. Pyongyang supports denuclearization in the Korean peninsula, and it has dismantled parts of its infrastructure. But it goes on to say that the country very much still poses a threat. Now, top security officials have been giving evidence to the Senate Intelligence Committee. Let's have a listen to Dan Coates, who's Director of National Intelligence.
North Korea will seek to retain its WMD capabilities and is unlikely to completely give up its nuclear weapons and production capabilities.
Now, Donald Trump, of course, last year tweeted after his meeting with Kim Jong-un that there was no longer a nuclear threat from North Korea. Now, this report clearly throws that assessment into doubt, and it goes on to say that we continue to observe activity that is inconsistent with full denuclearization.
All right, so that's North Korea. Let's take a look at Iran as well, because it's mentioned in the report. The report said that Iran is not developing nuclear weapons. They are trying to keep the nuclear deal alive, but there is also a warning.
At the moment, technically, they're in compliance, but we do see them debating amongst themselves as they fail to realize the economic benefits they hope for from the deal.
Now, the context of that, of course, is the Trump administration's withdrawal from the 2015 nuclear deal, and since having reimposed sanctions. Now, the report points out that Iran has not been developing nuclear activity necessary to produce a nuclear weapon. That explains how Gina Haspel there says that they are technically in compliance. They are also talking with the other countries behind the deal, including all the European countries and the EU, but that officials have been talking about resuming nuclear activities if they don't get some tangible gain from the nuclear deal. Now, it goes on also to say that Iran does pose a threat in other areas in the Middle East in terms of ballistic missiles, chemical weapons, long-term influence in Iraq and Syria, and makes similar comments about Yemen as well.
All right. Well, the last sort of highlight or headline, if you want, from the report was about cybersecurity. China and Russia were picked out. How much of a threat do they pose, do you think?
China and Russia are singled out right at the top of the report before it goes into cybersecurity as being really the main threats that drive the overall threat to US national security. Now, in terms of cybersecurity, it mentions both countries saying they pose a threat in terms of espionage, also disrupting civilian and military infrastructure. That's particularly in terms of Russia. And says all eyes now are on the 2020 US elections because both countries might use or likely to use online influence to try to weaken democratic institutions.